Hey all, welcome to another episode of TGT Media and Entertainment Industry Interview Podcast, where we interview the creative minds from the comic, film, music, and game publishing industry, and I'm your host, Kurt. We are joined today by two very talented individuals, very talented people in their own right. You have seen many of their works, of course, from Star Trek The Next Generation to various theater productions, as well as The Substitute 2, and many other great, amazing action films that I know I've seen in the past. We are joined today by Devorah Cutler-Rubenstein and Scott Rubenstein, and how are you both doing today?
We're good.
We're good. We took a walk, so
Never
we could...
been better.
Our standard line, never been better, which, is very cryptic, and in Hollywood, it works fine. Makes me curious. Are they really okay? What's going on?
Well, I'm glad you both are doing well. When you first approached me to do this interview, I looked into your works, I looked into your websites, and I saw the massive amounts of media that you have done in the past. And why did you both, and this is a question for both of you, why have you both gotten into the entertainment industry?
Well, Devorah was sort of born in Hollywood, and
Well, actually wanted nothing to do with it. But if I had been born in the Iron Range in Appalachia, I'd be in the mines. So since I was in Hollywood, graduated, I woke up and said, oh my God, I have to make a living. I'm an artist. I better get, involved with the movie business.
I was a teacher, and I won a comedy writing contest from 20th Century Fox, and that basically brought me down here.
He actually road tested his pilot with his young high school students. So when they gave it the thumbs up, then he knew he was ready.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful to hear. When you guys got into the industry itself, and it's apparently it's a very hard industry to get into. It's not what you know, it's who you know. That seems to be the adage these days. But from when you guys got into it in the was it early 80s compared to now, what has changed in your perspective being writers of entertainment?
Well, I think the major changes is a lot of different ways that you can get noticed. It's still, it's kind of helps to know someone because it gives you a door. But the way I look at Hollywood is it's a box. There's no windows, there are no doors, and there's no way in. But if you keep circling the box, you will eventually fall in, and then you'll give a speech very much like this about where you fell in, and then everybody will come to that point, and they will then come there, and there'll be no windows and no doors. And so the major thing really is to kind of circle the box. And one way of doing it is, getting some sort of web presence. And there's no answer. What it comes down to is there's no answer on how to get in. I went to high school and college with Aaron Spelling's nephew, and he came down here. He obviously had initial doors open, and you would see him on different Aaron Spelling shows in small parts, and then he's just sort of disappeared. It's really sort of essential to have something to say, and a way of saying it that's unique to who you are.
I think a lot of people just tagging, on what Scott's saying is that a lot of people are trying to create for, quote, the industry instead of looking at who they are and kind of what is it that they have that's unique, special, their strengths, even their weaknesses can be a quirky way that people kind of galvanize to them, that are attracted to them. So I think people are not just being honest about really what their brand can be. They are looking to please others. And you kind of have to begin to create relationships and then sort of look in the mirror and say, hey, what's occurring here? Scott and I, our first thing that we wrote together was a show for Showtime. And we had won a grant. It was definitely going to be on the air. We had the rights to a John Irving short story, which 2 weeks before shooting fell through, oddly. And so we looked at each other and the exec producer and said, So we were at a sushi bar like the next night, thinking, how do we slit our wrists? We missed this opportunity, and really it wasn't that desperate. But it was my chance to direct as well, and I had worked 8 years to get to this point, applying every year to the same grant, finally got it the last year, the last one that they were going to do. And I was in good company. I mean, there were a lot of really terrific actors that were stars that used this discovery program to get in. And I got in as a documentary filmmaker and as a theater director and writer. So Scott and I were sitting at a sushi bar, and we looked across the street, and there's a big tattoo parlor over there. I said, oh, wow, that's going to be great. You know, blood, guts, skulls. It's got to have great stories, grit. So we, crossed Sunset illegally to get to the tattoo parlor before it closed, and because it was late. We've been crying in our sake for hours. And we got in there, and we looked around, and there was a guy in a white shirt looking very neat. The place was completely pristine, and I stuck my proverbial foot in my mouth and said, where's the tattoo artist? He said, I'm the tattoo artist. I said, oh, sorry. So where are your tattoos? And so then he proceeded to roll up his sleeve, and there was like Michelangelo in the alley. His whole life in, black and gray was on his arm. And then Scott and I looked at each other. We knew we'd struck gold. And Scott had some amazing characters that he'd been thinking about, as had I. We kind of combined our forces. It ended up winning all these awards. It was called Peacock Blues, starring Poppy Montgomery and Bill Forsyth, among others, Tony Plana, Keith Coogan. We got a whole great cast. And then suddenly I got branded tattooed without even trying, as sort of the woman in the know about the tattoo world. So then I was, there was a series I got hired a pilot to write, and then suddenly I was doing a reality show, and I wouldn't have chosen it. So that's what I mean by looking in the mirror. What is the world reflecting back to you about what you're here to do? I would have never thought it was about tattooing in a million years. I did get tattooed also when I had breast cancer, too. Oh. They give little dots of tattoos. But other than that, I didn't get any tattoos.
Well, that's a good segue going into the breast cancer aspect. And you're a survivor of breast cancer. Congratulations. That is definitely a disease that needs to be fought tooth and nail. And I'm glad that you.
My husband is a survivor of me surviving. See, so that's
which is good. I mean, we all have to survive the significant others in our lives. I mean, that's a daily basis at that. But how did you took this tragedy that turned into surviving, and you turned it into a production? And talk about that. That's rather interesting.
So I woke up on the after surgery, because I didn't know going in. I for 8 months felt a lump, and my doctor kept saying, oh, it's nothing, it's just lumpy breasts. And I said, really? it's still there 8 months later. And I was actually shooting myself up with hormones trying to get pregnant, because I was at that cuspy, 40-something, where it's tough. Ladies out there, if you're watching, and men, knock up your significant other before it's too late, but only if you're prepared. But what happened was, I woke up and they told me I had breast cancer, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't really think I was going to die, but you just don't know. So I asked myself, what's scarier than breast cancer? Because I wanted to find something scarier, and I realized, stand-up comedy. Growing up in Hollywood, I had promised Steve Allen when I was 9 that if I didn't direct my first feature by the time I was 40, that I would do stand-up comedy. I don't know what possessed me to make that promise, but I made good on it. And so in the process, I started filming myself in all different settings during chemo, my hair falling out in the shower, my comedy routines, and the evolution of the material. And what was amazing about it, because we got a lot of traction, we even won an award twice to write a musical adaptation of the documentary that we ended up doing. But what was interesting was looking at the footage. There was something that happened to me when I was just sitting there watching this woman going through what I was going through, but it becomes objectified when you're looking at it as media. And I said, wow, that person's going through a lot of pain. And then I went, wow, that person's me. So in a weird way, I had done art my entire life as a painter and an illustrator and finally a documentary filmmaker and directing theater. And I thought, wow, I am really detached from this experience. And one way I got very serious about healing myself was whole hog, cliche. Sorry, he hates cliches, but whole piggy. I went and split, just dove into the whole experience of writing about what it was about, but finding the funny. And then that led to Scott actually writing really most of the the amazing words that were in the documentary, which is not so funny itself because it's poignant, but there are moments that are funny as well. I mean, especially when you're in the bathroom and I'm like going through stuff and he's repeating scores from a game. You know, he's watching television. And I'm like, oh my God, well, you know.
At least the Dodgers are winning. Well, let's talk about challenges in your careers, both of your careers. And Scott, we'll start with you here. You know, being a comedy writer, comedy is hard. I mean, you either you're funny or you aren't, and you really have to work at it if you're truly funny. But what were some of your challenges initially when you were trying to get into the business as a comedy writer?
Well, the initial challenge was getting over my own fear. I was living up in Sacramento. I was teaching a playwriting class. I kept seeing that there was an extension class on situation comedy writing. And I thought, wow, this is like perfect. But then I have to see whether or not I can do it. And it took me 2 years to actually sign up for the class. And finally I went in, I went into the class, and there was only 4 people in the class. And the first thing the guy said is, we're canceling the class.
Oh, no.
But there's like something you need to, I can teach you a little bit about stand-up comedy, not stand-up comedy, you know, writing sitcom. And you have a problem, then you try to solve it 3 times, and then you solve it on the 4th. And I went, okay, that's like great. And then I went in the next day to my playwriting class, which was a junior high school class right after lunch. They only had read when they signed up because it was an elective class. Yeah. They had only they only had read the word play, not the word playwriting, and they just thought this was like a fun class and we could just play. And so the class had its problems initially, but I came in after taking my class on sitcom writing, and I said, I have this idea for Welcome Back, Kotter. And all of a sudden it got incredibly quiet. And I took the idea of class as a he's getting burglarized as we speak. So anyway, so I took the problem I had in my class that I was taking. There wasn't enough students. And in my elective class, there was going to be a problem. There wouldn't be enough students to have an extra teacher. And so I used that as my idea for Welcome Back, Kotter, which was that Kotter, he needed to have 12 sweat hogs, and he only had 11. Suddenly, he ended up, if he lost the sweat hog, he would lose his job. And so every day I would bring in a little bit, because it got so quiet, people got suddenly actually interested because it was something real. And every day I would bring in a little bit of what I'd written, and then they would comment on it. At the same time, they would bring in their own things. But there's nothing better, and I suggest this to all people, is to write a project in front of your junior high school class, because they're merciless. They're not like my mother going, this is the most incredible thing that you ever did, and you're just an amazing human being. They never once said that. But occasionally they would laugh, and I realized those were the funny jokes. And the ones they didn't laugh at, and they started to throw things I realized wasn't the funny thing. So that started the process of sort of throwing me into writing more. I always made up stories. I always told jokes. But the idea of actually doing it for a living was kind of alien for me. I was in the Peace Corps. I taught junior high, preschool, high school, college, and so suddenly I was knocking on a door that I wasn't certain I wanted to knock on. And right before my child was born, I was reading in the paper, there was an article that there was a comedy writing contest at 20th Century Fox. I was living in Sacramento, and you needed to have 2 scripts. By that time, I had 2 scripts, and that got me down here. And then everything else that happened from being down here, I have very strong survival instincts. And I wrote, first we started writing comedy, my partner and I. Then we started, when comedy died, there was actually 2 periods, not the recent period. And we thought, hey, now we can write drama. And so we wrote a Remington Steele. We sold that. Then we wrote Cagney and Lacey's, and whatever sort of happened from the writing, whenever somebody said, "Can you do this?" I just said yes, and I tried to figure out after that how that would actually work.
I think we share that, the idea of just jumping in and saying yes. I mean, yeah.
And there's never a sort of a no. You just figure out, because if you say no, usually nothing happens.
Right. Definitely. I think that's a great positive outlook to have, because throw yourself into the wind and throw yourself to the fire, they say, and whatever happens happens. Now, these experiences in your lives, both of your lives, have led to some great, amazing, and talented people that you've had the pleasure of working with as well too. But talk about your actual business itself, because you create mentoring or consulting for script writing?
Right. I mean, I did want to say that how I got into the business too is I was thinking, well, I'll go in as an assistant initially, and then I was sort of just saying, well, to all my interviews, I would do that. But then I got fed up and said, you know what, I'm really a director. So next interview, I'm just going to say I'm a director. So I walked into a producer at Fox, and the timing was right. He just had lost his assistant. He said, well, you can't direct today, but can you read scripts? I mean, yeah, I didn't know what he meant by that, but I said, sure. And can you type? I said, sure, but I didn't tell him I could only type 20 words a minute. And even though I'd taken high school typing. And the other thing was he was doing a big sci-fi action movie, Damnation Alley, which was an adaptation of a Roger Zelazny amazing novel by Ellen Sharp, another incredible writer. Yeah. And he had these giant boards by a wonderful, wonderful visualist, Peter Guzet, I believe he was. And I said, and I had done special effects at college. So I said, oh, I get it. You just took sand, inverted it as the sky, and put on a green filter. And he looked at me, he said, you know about special effects? I said, oh yeah, I built an optical printer in college. What? And so I got hired because he was stupid about a certain area that he needed to be smart. So I was kind of his front woman. And then from there, that was my first job at a studio, and I worked my way up to being executive, and I was always directing and writing theater and trying to learn my craft. And then along the way, I decided that, oh gosh, I can now help writers because I have all these contacts. And even from the first day working at that job at Fox, I always got around from my desk and sat and had coffee with the agent in the office and talked about my directing, which is crazy. My resume was 9 pages long, but it had only been to college, So, I mean, it's just pretty funny. No, I didn't lie about anything. I just was, I was a grip. I was, everything had all the categories of all the shorts you worked on. But my coaching service is called the Script and Novel Broker. And basically what I do, I have a space on Melrose and Kings Road, which is called the Open Space on Melrose, which is a place really for writers and actors, directors, producers, poets, wannabe shamans, real shamans to come and kind of strut their stuff, work either with me as a coach or come and rent the space. We just had a director renting the space. It has a beautiful little stage and kind of a Meisner kind of galley, a door. It's a special technique for actors to work with. And I just love working with talent. And so in my business, I try to help the writer or artist realize, get a sense, a mirror, Scott and I both do this, to help them get a sense, are they ready? Are they ready to take their work out there? So having done everything that I have done, and I've dedicated myself to storytelling and understanding every single aspect of it, whether it's distribution, or just being on a set, literally gripping or shooting my own film with my own Canon, and having actually been a cinematographer on shorter documentaries. But the idea is to use your contacts to help others. So if I could help people and know that they're ready for the room, that they're good at an interview, that they're clear about what it is that they have that's different about other people when they walk in the room, that there's a sense of confidence about what they are, and what their art is and what they're here to do. So that's what I help people do. And then I've helped them get their books published. I have a memoir that just got published 2 years ago that came to me in very rough shape and then ended up winning a national book award. So I love, as working at Columbia Pictures, I work with a lot of novelists and playwrights. So I love scripts, obviously, and working with screenwriters, but I also love just, straight fiction's awesome. So hopefully that's clear. Just coaching talent and bringing their truth out so that they can mine it, for gold for their career.
Well, I think it's rather interesting, especially in this day and age with all the technology that's available compared to back then. I mean, it's great to see that the traditional methods of finding your script, finding your purpose, and finding the characters and the conflicts that they have to go through hasn't changed in all these years. And it's great to see, truly. Like myself, I'm going back to school in visual arts and communication media and film. But interviews like this, the interviews I've had in the past with amazing people like both Devorah and Scott, like yourselves, I would like to be a documentary filmmaker. I could see myself in that type of role. But getting to that point, though, I'm not sure how to truly approach that. And from what you guys have explained to me, I think I know where to start, and I think I have something to work towards as either getting in the industry as a grip or in the lower levels and build my way up. I think it's very doable in any career.
What's cool about what you said and your distinction is I do think that there's this amazing technological explosion. And there's all these platforms that people can create for. Scott and I are actually working on a webisode that we want to do. I'm also doing a reality sizzle reel for another project for a client. And you can define what is your story about, what's the big idea. Because I don't care if you go all the way back to Aristotle or if you go into the future to some wonderful story gurus that are coming around the bend that we don't even know. It's the same thing. I mean, it's a beginning, middle, and end. It's character, challenge, and a change, what I call the cha-cha-cha or the dance. So you will find what your story is. There's certain things that you can do that will even kind of what I call true you or get you even clear about, okay, here's what I'm going to gravitate to. Like I find personally I gravitate to stories about betrayal. I don't know, I can look in my history and say, what was that about? I can go back to divorce or even earlier and say, well, what is it about? How do you transform? What's the reverse of betrayal is really support and connection. So then you kind of get a sense of, okay, your personal theme might be about connection and disconnection, and then you gravitate to stories that are kind of where you light up. Because if you're lit up, then you can light up the world.
So if you have passion for what you're writing, it shows in your work.
And it should be more than passion. I compare it that you should be like a Jehovah's Witness. You need to be you need to believe in what you do so strongly that people can slam the door in your face, and you're still going to go to the next door. You're still going to knock on it, no matter what.
But you don't want to become a stalker to the person that slammed the door in your face. You do.
You need to move to the next.
Yeah, need to move to the next door. I mean, you can give 3 knocks, but yeah. There was one guy that had a pretty successful career, and he submitted a story idea every week to the show that he wanted to write for, but he had an in. He had made friends with somebody at a bar who said, yeah, I know you're a new writer, just keep throwing ideas at me until something sticks, and they loved his tenacity. And over that year, he developed his craft, and then he got a spec job and got into the industry. So that's a case of, I guess, a positive stalking example.
Awesome. Well, that's good to know. Now, being a coach, being a mentor, being mentors that you are in teaching and everything along that line, especially with this industry as fickle as it can be, have you seen any new changes in the industry that are positive for new writers or actors, like maybe new contests that are occurring or film festivals that one should approach?
Well, there's 2 theories. One is that film festivals in general don't help you. There's sort of a negative thing to everything you do. So the idea is, again, to avoid, now people are doing their own web series. They're getting it on YouTube. They're throwing things from planes that say you need to watch at a certain period of time. And again, there is no answer on what you can do. There is more stuff that's out there. And because you can do it cheaper and there are more opportunities, you can at least get your work out there. And then it becomes you're moving into being a salesperson. And initially, I think you need to be your own salesperson, no matter what happens. There's a lot of negative stories even once you get an agent. But before you get an agent especially, you need to just kind of figure out how can I get this person to read my stuff or to see it.
And there are lots of techniques. I mean, and you're going to try to create a brand. You're trying to create an awareness of you, because nobody's going to come find you if you're under a rock, you know. And even no matter how good your work is, it really is about those relationships and people saying, wow, you know, I could see somebody, you know, having a relationship with this, you know, when I'm working with someone, I can see how, they're magnetic in the room. They're kind of exciting. There's energy in the room. That's somebody I can get behind. And people are always looking at that. So social networking is huge. And if you, as a writer, are not interested in doing that, you need to then, you know, find someone where you can work out a trade, so they can do it for you, that knows how to do it, or you partner with people and create your own little networks and groups. Acting classes are great. Taking improv is great. Out of that, as a writer, even if you're not an actor, take an improv class. Start networking with actors. Understand what the actor goes through, so that you, as a writer, you're writing dialogue that's authentic. Because that's what's going to get you noticed, is really actors responding to your material and wanting to work with you. Even maybe more so than a director. And some of these actors, when you go to a lot of showcases, if you are a writer and you check out theater in LA or whatever city you're in, Chicago, New York, Illinois, there's fantastic theater being done all over. Try to get involved as a writer with a small theater group. You know, write some 1 minute to 2 minute to 10-minute plays, and get your work up there. Write for newspapers, blog. There's just so many different ways in. But you're really right when you go back to it. It's kind of who you know, and then how do you develop those relationships. And it is by being gutsy. And even if you aren't gutsy, I talked to a writer yesterday, and he said, I'm incredibly shy, but I know that I have to put myself out there, so I go to all these screenings. I mean, I was just shocked because he's practically an agoraphobe, but yeah.
Well, especially when I first started these podcasts and the video interviews here, I was not a social guy. I had to break out of my proverbial shell rather quickly.
Did your therapist actually recommend that you create a podcast to get over your shyness? Just kidding.
No, not quite. Actually, it was
pulling you here, huh?
More like I couldn't afford a psychiatrist at the time. But how about yourself, Scott? Anything to add to that?
No, I just, again, believe that you find what it is, your voice, what you want to say. And it's really important to do tough stories and not easy stories. One time I went to something Devorah was directing, and I was watching people trying out for the part during the casting session. And I had a good friend who was part of the casting thing that we both knew. And he did an incredible job, but there was nothing unusual about what he did. So there was a couple people did unusual things, and that's what gets noticed. In my writing, it's when you take a hard story, and the harder the story, sort of the better, and you make it work, then there's some potential in selling it. So when you read a script, you want to be just really, really interested in the script, and it needs to be different, because there's a whole bunch of people who have jobs who can write as well as you. So you have to show that your take on something is just that much different. And it's really the essential thing. Because a lot of times people say, hey, my spec script is as good as anything that I see on the air. And you go, well, that's okay, but it has to actually be better. Because there's people on the show that are already hired. They want to find somebody that has a unique take on something. And even if you're not perfect, and you don't have to be perfect, that even if you're not perfect, that's okay. The guy who wrote Scream, who's somebody that I knew when he was living on people's couches, he sold a script that was only half finished. Nobody ever tells you to write a script that's half done. But in real life, nobody reads more than 10 pages. And he got an agent, and he liked it. And the agent gave it to somebody, and they read half of the script, and it became done. And eventually it went from, I think, The Killing of Miss Tingle to The Education of Miss Tingle. And he started to get more success, and eventually that was done. But there's unusual things to do and have unusual things to say. And it's hard. On the first spec script that we wrote, which was a mass spec script, all through the script, we just kept saying we should have come up with an easier story. But once we finished the story, which was the idea that somebody comes in during the Korean War out of the mountains, comes to their camp, and he's Korean, and he was fighting in World War II, and he never knew World War II ended. Comes out in World War, and now the Korean War is going on. And it was a hard story to tell, but once it got done, it got us an incredible amount of work on shows.
Yeah, I think when you crack something difficult, and I didn't really even know that, and I've been married to Scott 18 years, so I didn't know.
I tried to give her one thing.
Yeah, but this idea, because I've always, whatever it is, art is not life, it's larger than life, and I've always gravitated and said, okay, what am I terrified of? What is the hardest thing? And I will do it. Like I'll, audition for things, even though I'm not an actor, just to have that experience, or I just think that's a really good Geiger counter for people, because you have to kind of go bigger than your own fear. So you choose something that's even harder, and then cracking it is very satisfying for you as an artist, but also it will get you noticed.
Do you feel that you're always searching for something more challenging, both of you? Is that something that's a life goal?
For me, it's that I tend to get very uncomfortable with where I am, and against my better wishes, I find myself doing things that I don't want to do. So there's like two of me, and I just can't stay in the same place.
See, and I just thought I saw double. It's kind of
so,
all right.
It just forces me, that there's an uncomfortableness that forces me to do things differently, and then I find myself in situations that are difficult.
Right. I mean, it is that thing about the different, like the little amoeba just kind of hanging out, status quo in the petri dish, and then you put a little piece of food in the other end, it suddenly gets activated, and it starts literally moving to that food, whatever it is. So you want to activate yourself as an artist somehow. And Scott's big on, and I learned this working with him, is the concept of surprise. That if you aren't surprised, your audience isn't going to be surprised. So we've been, and I have learned this, is that, and I did this as an artist, I would always paint myself into a corner, literally, do something that was impossible to do in the time that I had to do it in, and it just really activated me and activated all my creativity and imagination. So who you are and what is special will come out in those situations of extreme danger and challenge, and that's what you want to do for your character as well, is put them in those extreme situations of danger and challenge, whether it's documentary and you're making a record of it, or whether it's fiction.
When you're pitching your scripts to the studios, because I'm learning about how to create a pitch package and everything like that, so I'd like a professional opinion here from this. We're learning formatting, we're learning the cover letter aspect, how to approach studios for funds and all of that other stuff. There has to be no easy way to approach a studio saying, I need X amount of dollars here. Can you make this happen? I mean, what is your approach when trying to fund a project?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different approaches. I mean, right now there are 3 scripts that I'm representing as the script broker for clients. One actually is a script of Scott's, and I'm attached as a producer, which I don't normally do. Oh, another one I'm also attached. One's a comedy. One's an action comedy. Another one's a rom-com. And the other one's like just a straight sort of farce comedy. But I called a guy who I know represents a major actress, and whose company is also a production company, bigger than my own company, that I could potentially partner with. So it's about strategic alliances in one case. And so that then would, because it's a major actress, would probably, in one case, it's a studio type movie. The script is a, action comedy, but very big, expensive. And the other one is a smaller film that this actress kind of swings both ways. She does studio and indies. And so I would try to partner with them. But in another setting, I actually co-wrote a script with another writer, Laura Shiner, a comedy, because a casting director / client had given me a script. And I thought, wow, this has really potential. It could be really funny. And so I hired one writer through the Writers Guild, and in our production company, we partnered. And then it turned out that it just wasn't exactly what I had wanted to direct. So I then partnered with Laura. And then we went around raising money for about a year. And so when we raised about $750,000 for a comedy that we shot in the Ukraine. And and that was another approach. And then how did I find the money? Well, I reached out to pretty much everyone because, again, it's what Scott said. I was just so passionate. I mean, it was my shot as a director, direct a feature. The money was reasonable in terms of a first time feature, funny, and then just the script was really quite good and funny. So actors were just dying to play it. They just were at the table reads. They were giving me notes and
also realize that it's a collaboration. Things change. You start out with an idea for a movie, and it starts to change. Somebody wants it differently, and then you kind of look at it. And most things, basically it's about survival. What's the best way to survive? What's the best way? The essential part of your idea to survive.
But that's your skill then is adaptation, because survival is all about adaptation. You have to be able to adapt.
Yeah, and it's a business. This is like moving. I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years. I lived in a place with no electricity, no running water. I come from a family. My father's a prisoner of war in the Philippines. I ended up going to the Philippines. And I realized once I was there that in order to survive, I started to make up stories. And for some reason, they got the fact that I was making them up. And that you have to get used to certain things. And so once you realize that basically you start out one place on a trip when you travel, you end up someplace else, but the someplace else can be much more interesting than the place you thought you were going. And when I remember that in my life, my life works just much better. When I think I can actually control all of this, it's like Goethe said that civilization is a drunken man on a horse. I think the horse may be drunk too. And eventually you will get someplace, and maybe, on the New Age concept, that is the place you're supposed to get to. But if you want to survive in the business, you have to look at things will change. I had one person in a class I was teaching in Northridge, and he was an excellent writer. We were doing adaptation, and his first 3 pages were great, and he could never write a 4th page because it had to be perfect. And in my life, there was always people who sat in front of me who were the perfect ones. I realized I didn't have that job. And I realized that if I got to 90%, I could still get an A. I didn't have to worry about every math problem because I inverted a number or did something. And that, to me, works better. When I was in the Peace Corps, the people who survived the Peace Corps were not the people who were best at being Peace Corps volunteers, but the people who could survive the fact that the world doesn't work perfectly. And I think the business here is just very, very similar. It's a crazy business with a different language, with a different set of culture, with really no kind of rules that
lots
make
of bad
any real
behavior,
sense.
but some good people in it.
And you just kind of go, hey, when I was in Sacramento and I announced I was a writer, it was actually a big deal. When I won a contest, came down here and sold some things, and there was the first strike, and I went to Universal, and there were all these people who were striking, and it was this gigantic room filled with writers. I had really no idea that there was a whole bunch of people trying to do this. I think if I thought that initially, I might never have done that.
But the percentage, I was talking to someone yesterday, yes, there are, 100,000 people trying to break whatever, but there's only 10,000 that are really have the goods or are willing to go the distance. And of those 10,000, you have to imagine that some of them are going to break through. And anyway, I had another thing to comment. I didn't want to get off topic in a second. Oh, well, one of the interesting things, I made this DVD. Scott has one too that he's made, but this is called The Insider's Guide to Film Financing. I don't know where the thing is.
You'll have to, right there. Up a little.
So, up?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So how this happened was bizarre. I was teaching a class with Scott on, I think you were talking about writing for the future. I was teaching one on, I guess it was techniques for, and what happened was a teacher that was supposed to teach. Is there a whistle?
Yeah, that's a parakeet. Keep going.
Is it really a parakeet?
Yeah, it's really a parakeet. Yeah.
Anyway, that's my harmonica. It's a little lady. So, but the I don't know. The parakeet made me ADHD temporarily. It was adorable. Maybe not for you, but for me. the teacher was unavailable, and the guy that ran the whole expo, Screenwriting Expo, knew that I had produced, some movies and raised money, and so he said, "Could you do this?" So I think it was like 24 hours to prepare, and yes, I knew about financing and distribution, but I didn't really know enough to teach a class. But I just threw myself in, literally did not sleep, and they made the video. I taught the class; they loved the class. I learned a lot because there was a lot that I didn't know. And then they asked me 2 weeks later to actually film the class. And I said, okay. And what's amazing is that this video, I was pitching at the AFM another project, The Other Side of Innocence. I don't know if you can see it. And a guy who ran out of the room said, I saw your video. Are you Devorah Cutler-Rubenstein? It helped me so much. And then he dragged me into the room of the person I was about to meet and said, this is the woman that helped me. It was like, completely random. I would have never expected the circle to be like that. But that's how Hollywood is. It's like he has a great story about the woman that got discovered in the line in the chocolate thing.
Yeah, there was a woman I was teaching in Northridge, and I unfortunately don't remember her name, but she was a lawyer in Chicago, came to LA and wanted to break in as a writer. So after 2 years, she didn't break in at all. Nothing happened. And she was at a chocolate store in Santa Monica, and she was online complaining about how nobody will read a script and there's just no way to break in. The person in front of her was probably the only person in all of LA that who was successful and would have responded, turned around and said, hi, I'll read your script. And that was David Milch, who actually one of the few people who really helped people that way. And that's how she broke in.
And she had been a showrunner and had a great career. And it's like, how random is that? But she was doing the work. See, that's the thing. She was ready. So, there's just lots of stories of people who are just ready, and they're in a gondola at a film festival. Getting back to your film festival, I personally, I sort of disagree with Scott. I think it's really important to go to film festivals, networking, screenwriting competitions and conferences, and meet all the agents that are there, and just be ready in case someone says, wow.
I meant entering film.
Oh, you meant entering film contests. Okay.
The fact is that when you get out of Los Angeles and you go to these things, and we've taught at some of them, it's a really great way to meet people because they're stuck in the town that you're in.
Right. Yeah.
And so suddenly it's an incredible way of meeting people. In LA, they're used to giving a talk and answering a few questions and then leaving and going home.
But like when we went to Willamette, which is a writing conference up in Portland, which is terrific for writers, screenwriters, poets, everyone, there were probably, I would say, 20 instructors there, and the instructors were working producers, working agents, working managers, and that population that were there for the conference had access. They had access to drinking, I even know a manager who lost her job because she slept with one of the writers. That actually happened. Anyway, random interesting fact. Okay. So, don't sleep with people, especially with writers, then you sleep your way to the bottom. But no, I just think that it's important to, professionally be ready with your work and also know what a meeting looks like. So, I have certain techniques that I work on in pitching. You asked about that, where I think people are very nervous when they go into a pitch. And so one of the things that I recommend, and when I do my pitching seminars and teach specifically about pitching, I'm actually, Hollywood and Mind magazine called me the premier pitching coach. So I'm kind of cool. I like that moniker. But when you walk into that room, just look at that person's face, find something to like. Just very simple note. And then if they reach for your hand or you're able to shake their hand, think about how much you love what you do. And what that does is it gives your very nervous, busy little brain that's worried about, are they going to buy it? Are they going to like me? It gives it something to do so that who can actually show up in the room is who you are versus all these, thoughts and distractions from the actual focus of the meeting. So that's just a good way to launch into a room and warm it up.
I think that's wonderful to hear. I mean, public speaking in general can be very difficult for many people. I mean, being a comedian that you are, Devo, and that you went through that process as well, or pitching in general to your various screenplays and scripts you've gone through. I mean, those that can handle that aspect of talking with anyone in general, which I'm glad I'm able to do nowadays, is is that much better for their career and that much better for their life in general. So, one thing I can't let you guys go without discussing Scott's work on Star Trek. I'm a big Star Trek fan. I have seen that scene, and you know.
That was do you want like a background on this? How it happened? Or
that would be good, actually. Yes.
Okay, it was very strange. We had written actually a MacGyver script, which sold, and then there was a strike. My whole life was changed and went well and went bad, all about strikes. But there was a strike, and because there was a strike, writers had more time to actually read. Because what happens with executive producers, they really don't have any time. You come into a room, they have hundreds of scripts behind them, but they have no time to read them. So after like going away for a week or so, thinking the strike is going to be short, then coming back, then eventually having time to read the script is a big deal. And
are you talking about the people, the buyers?
The buyers.
Yeah.
The executive producer was Maurice Hurley on the show. And Maurice, wherever he is now, was not the most organized of people, an incredibly great writer. And our agent told us we would be on staff on the show. Don't worry about anything. Just go in, show them that you're normal people, and you'll be fine. So we went in, and we went in with no ideas. Luckily, and in those days, it was a little bit harder to get...
It's a bad idea. He is not recommended.
To get scripts. It's harder to get scripts. So eventually I talked somebody into giving me some script, so at least I would be familiar with the show. And so then we had like 15 minutes. My partner was a physicist, has his doctorate in physics, taught at Caltech, which they didn't consider at all important. And so we're just talking, telling jokes, being charming as best we could. And after about 15 minutes, Maurice turned to us and said, why are you here? And, you know, it's like, well, we're having a good time, but what are we doing? And so I said, well, our agent said you wanted us to be on staff. And then he looked at us and said, our show is a really hard show to write for, and you can't be on staff unless you've written a script for us. What ideas do you have? So my first idea was to run out of the room, strangle my agent, and because here we are with absolutely no ideas and just charming, which...
Oh, you also had to call the people you told were going to be working, the family members.
And then all my family members, I was picturing the phone calls. Well, actually, we're not going to be on staff. And this was all going to be disastrous. And then I thought, well, we're here now, and this is it. And as far as I could tell, even though we probably could have come back. So I just started making up an idea. So I just went, Wesley, he falls in love. And I just waited, because shows that people do with cast members falling in love are usually done by people on staff, because they're kind of fun shows. And they seem to be interested. So it wasn't, because usually what happens is there's a note that comes right away. We just did the script. We're doing it next season. Wesley, we decided we'll never fall in love, whatever the things are. And so I went, okay, so now we're going to move forward. And I'm going, well, who could you have fallen in love with? And they said, well, a woman comes from another planet, because where is she coming from? And then so they're going to pick her up. And as I was telling the story, I'm just waiting for them to say no. And they keep seemingly are interested. And I said, well, and she has a bodyguard. And the bodyguard, I don't know, it's a shapeshifter. So it turns out that the bodyguard is a shapeshifter. He falls in love. And then he falls in love with a woman that he really can't get to, because there's this incredible bodyguard who can be anything. And they liked the story, and that's the episode that ended up being done. And then we were on staff for a year. We were in Gene Roddenberry's old office, and we had this, we didn't have a lot of power, but we were still in his old office. And then later on, when the show there was a lot of politics that happened on the show, none of which we had anything to do with. And so the next season, there was a whole bunch of new people. Maurice Hurley was gone. Rick Berman was there. And so we tried to pitch later on ideas, and we never came within a light year of selling anything. So it was really, but that's not so.
Yeah, we went back and
really
pitched Scott
within, moments of just having the whole thing fall apart. For me, what I realized, though it's not really a good thing in a way, is I'm much fresher when I have to actually think on my feet. When I'm reading something, I'm not reading it, but when I'm acting it out, or I'm not as good. I'm very conscious of trying to remember things. But once I get sort of off script, for me, it's better not to come in with an idea.
Yeah.
Even though I don't suggest this to anyone.
But everybody general, works differently, though. And I think that's the important.
Well, nobody goes in without having. It's fine. Nobody goes in without having an idea. But that's how it happened. And we worked on the script. It was very fun. Learned a lot of stuff.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, it was such an iconic show as well. I mean, going from the original series, as campy as the original series was, but both of you, truly, Scott and Devorah, this has been a wonderful pleasure speaking to both of you. You've opened my eyes to the possibilities that this has been for me, for my career in the future, and I look forward to seeing what you have in store with us for the next coming years for your scripts, and is there anything
No.
I'm sorry?
We look forward to seeing your stuff. In fact, I want to send you, I have a book on writing shorts, What's the Big Idea?
Oh,
and I want to send this to you. I don't know if you can see it. I use it when I teach as an adjunct professor at USC, but everything that I believe about character work being here being so important and all the different kinds of ways you can structure stories. It works for docs as well. And so I would love to send this to you as a gift, as a thank you, and I'll get your address later.
I would greatly appreciate that. I'm looking forward to reading that, truly. And is there anything else you'd like to tell the listeners and the people watching the show about yourselves, or anything that they should keep their attention towards?
Well, we are working on a webisode. It's called Pasta Fazoo, and that'll be hopefully on the net next year sometime, sort of early spring. But it's about 3 generations of Italian men, all who think they're the best cook on the planet and the best lover on the planet, and they kind of help each other and give each other a hard time at the same time. So it's kind of odd couple squared with a family of very egocentric, narcissistic Italian cooks. So anyway, we're looking forward to that. So we're having fun with that. And I just got hired to write a feature comedy, so that I'll keep you posted on that. And if that all happens, to co-write that. And Scott, we're going to be doing some more teaching and seminars. There are free seminars that we do during the summers at USC. So if people are interested, there's a website called Dating Your Character. Just as it sounds, .net. And then if people want to get a newsletter, every few months I publish something on writing and the challenges of writing and the upcoming seminars. And we just had a really neat one, which we just spoken word once a month downstairs. So if people are interested in reading their work, getting feedback, it doesn't cost anything.
What's your email address?
Oh, my email address is devocoaching at gmail.com. So.
Wonderful. And again, thank you both so much for coming on the show. I'm sorry, Scott, did you have anything else you wanted to talk?
Nothing to say. This is my entire... No, it's all fine. I'm doing fine.
Oh, okay.
A book. Both of us just got in an anthology, which I do want to plug because it's an amazing, amazing anthology. It's called Now Write. They had Now Write screenwriting, Now Write nonfiction, and both Scott and I are in this amazing collection next to such talented writers who write in fantasy and sci-fi and all kinds of speculative fiction. But that'll be coming out next year. Lori Laneson is the editor, and Scott has a very cool exercise in there. It's what it is. It's all these writers talking about how they got in, how they broke in, as well as giving a writing exercise. So it's awesome. Now write, and you can. It's as it sounds. You can probably get in contact with Lori and find out where she's having seminars too, because she has the writers in, and then she does workshops with various writers. Anyway, that was what you were asking. It was so lovely talking with you. Good luck.
Oh, thank you guys so much. And that was this episode of TGT Media. And tune in next week for another great episode. And have a great day, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.